So continuing the playthrough here, I'm switching over to peacetime production for the moment. Barbarians attack there and fail miserably. But here I'm moving troops closer to Indian territory because it looks as if I don't wipe them off this continent in this scenario, they'll wipe me off the continent. And again, as I've said before, later versions of Civilization handled this in a more balanced way, arguably more civilized way. You could say that the later versions of Civilization feature essentially countries that behave like countries. So they may very well invade your territory. You have to be very wary of them. But they also trade. They also trade in technologies, not just money. And it's much easier to negotiate with them. Whereas in the original Civilization, they behave as if they're some kind of infection or something, like basically always the most imperialist possible approach. Or they always have the most imperialist possible approach to their foreign policy, and that's not entirely accurate historically. Obviously, many countries have behaved that way, but the extent of the barbarism in this version of Civilization is arguably, it's arguably incompatible with the notion of the game Civilization. That's at least part of the problem. But also, it is very limiting because it makes it into a little bit too much of a war game and takes away a lot of the appeal, because there are plenty of war games out there. And in fact, after I take India here, that's when I'm going to conclude the playthrough, because I will have essentially shown the essence of what the original Civilization game is, although I will not have shown all the technologies. I'll also review the user interface before I conclude, but that's a few parts down the road here. So I'm now up against Indian territory. You notice the irrigation down there in the lower right. So I have a peace treaty with them, so I can't go in there until I'm at war with them. Oops. Okay, so I got to build a barracks here. Barbarians have shown up again. One other thing, too, you may have noticed is that there are rules about zones of control in the Civilization game, so you can't move from one square adjacent an enemy or rival to another square adjacent an enemy or rival. The exception would be if you have an alliance with them. And in Civilization 2 and later versions of the game, you can also field partisans or, insurgents, guerrillas, whatever you want to call them, that can do that. So I just developed gunpowder, and as I predicted, I'm going to have to replace all my barracks. Now I'm researching trade, but I have to look at my city status up here to see which cities are building military units, because any city building a military unit will have to switch to building a barracks. So I'll double check here. Byzantium and Brundisium both require barracks. to continue military production. So I will switch to producing a barracks. So there's the other Indian city. I did find that there were only 2, because it's still 780 BC in the chieftain skill level. So none of the other civilizations will be comparable in size to mine if I've played the game right. So now that Carthage has built a temple, I'm going to build its new barracks. So see, it's warning me about zones of control there, as I mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to actually attack and see what I can do, because it's clear that these are the only 2 cities given the stage of the game that I'm in. And already I have musketeers invading, even though, as you noticed, those weren't the units that I used. I don't have any musketeers built yet. But once you develop gunpowder, the invasion scene switches to musketeers from legions. So now I have only 1 city left to go. And of course, one way to solve the zones of control problem is to just attack the unit that's in your way. But see, I have plenty of troops here, so this shouldn't actually take very long. Especially because, again, it's the chieftain skill level, so the strength of my troops relative to theirs is very favorable to me. They have phalanxes there. And I take the city, Delhi, and this will be the end of the Indian civilization for this game. But this will also be the last war that I'll do in this playthrough, because now I control these continents. And so what I should do is continue settling. There we go, Indian civilization destroyed by the Romans. So it makes sense now to continue settling this continent and start building farmland, although I won't get very far before the end of the playthrough, because I'm going to end the playthrough at 180, and you can see it's 740 BC there, which in real life would be a very long time, but in civilization it's not, because before 180 your increments of time are 20-year increments. So here I'm using the go-to command as a shortcut, so that I don't have to move all these units step by step, although it's kind of flawed, as you'll see, because sometimes they try to go across ocean when they can't do that. So I'm going to have to continue this in the next playthrough.